Hello MTG friends, Zach back here with another video on the road today, so I am not in my usual office, but we are going to be talking about I guess two sets that are near and dear to my heart that, as you can kind of see on the title screen here, I think might be one of the best sets for Commander ever made. This is Streets of New Capenna and its associated Commander set. I have 100 cards I'm going to flip through here. I know that's a lot, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them. I just want to talk about what a huge impact that New Capenna had on the Commander format, both for its 3-color options that it provided, and just a bunch of really cool support cards that work really excellently in multiplayer. So, we're going to go through the legendary creatures, so the stuff that can be your Commander first, and then we're going to go through in color order a bunch of other really cool cards that I think have an impact out of Capenna, and kind of try and give you an idea of why I think this set is one of the best for Commander of all time. So let's get started. First, we have Benny Brack's Zoologist. This guy is an absolutely integral piece in any token-making deck that plays white. He has Convoke on his own, so he can come down for effectively free, and then if you make a token this turn, you draw a card on your end. Not your end step, each end step. Benny Brax is absolutely crazy. He's both great as a commander, and he's really, really effective in the 99 of other commander decks. I personally play this card in my Ginny Fey deck, which we'll talk about later. We have Giada, Font of Hope. She is an angel with flying and vigilance, boosts your other angels with a 1/1 counter on it for each additional angel you control when one enters. And you can tap her to add a white to cast your angel spells. Giada is kind of like a linchpin piece for any angel tribal deck. Also really good in any deck that just plays a lot of angels kind of incidentally. I have a Safara deck that plays Giada in it because there's a decent chunk of angels in there, and Giada does a great job of ramping, making my stuff bigger, and also just being a 2-mana 2/2 with flying and vigilance. That's pretty significant. We have Jaxis the Troublemaker next in red. She kind of gives a card, well, like not even a card, but a card on your board blitz. So you pay a red, you tap her, you discard a card. You make a token that's a copy of another creature you control. It gets haste. When it dies, draw a card and then sack it at the beginning of the next end step. And you can only do this at sorcery speed. Jaxis herself has blitz, so you could even drop her in out of nowhere. Like on the turn, activate, make your copy get haste. Draw 2 cards off Jaxis and the thing that you made. This card's just a really effective combat engine piece. Turns the cards in your hand, maybe a land that you weren't going to play, into a creature on your board and then replaces itself later on in the turn. Jaxis is super sweet, both as a commander and in the 99. Urabrask Heretic Praetor is he's not the best Urabrask now that we have our final Urabrask out of March of the Machine, but this guy is still pretty great. It kind of stops your opponent from drawing a card during their draw step. And then, like, impulse draws it. It basically says, look, you either play this card now instead of playing what you were planning to do, or you lose it. It's gone. And then you also get a bonus card through that exile effect as well. I think Urabrask is, honestly, a pretty good card. Like, he's not nasty. He's not quite as mean as many of the other Praetors and their effects, but I think he's still a powerful piece. And he really forces your opponents to make decisions that they might not want to make. All right, getting into the multicolor commanders, we have Jolene, the Plunder Queen. So she is a 2/2 in Gruul colors, and whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, so not you, they get a treasure. That includes you, though. You can attack your opponents and get that treasure. And when you would create one or more treasures, instead, make 2 of them. Well, get 1 extra, basically. And you can sack 5 treasures to put 5 counters on her. I think she's a pretty cool Gruul commander, definitely a little more unique. She's wearing an Infinity Gauntlet, which is pretty sick as well. But really, the whole goal of this deck is absolutely going to be Gruul treasures. You're trying to make Jolene huge and just win the game that way. Pretty cool card, and it really incentivizes opponents to not swing at you in Gruul without just having huge dudes. We have Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer. This guy costs 1 less for each different mana value among cards in your grave, and when you pitch a card, as long as it's not a land, you can cast it from your graveyard. Oscar is so cool, works really well in kind of Madness-style decks, and also in some discard-style decks. This card's really great with like some looting and rummaging style abilities here, and he seems like a really cool card. I would definitely recommend checking this one out. We have a Phoenix Tribal here with Cyrix, Carrier of the Flame. This is definitely our first and best Phoenix Tribal commander so far. Weird card. It kind of looks like an artifact, but apparently it's not an artifact. But it's a really cool effect that lets you deal damage to things as long as you've got Phoenixes coming back out of your graveyard. And Cyrix himself can dodge commander attacks by being able to be cast out of the graveyard whenever another one of your Phoenixes dies. He does a really great job of just kind of moving Phoenixes around in and out of the grave and getting a lot of value there. This is also a really great deck for cards like Sir Conrad and Desecrated Grave, because you're moving things out of your graveyard, and so you are going to get benefits for doing that. We have Bess Soul Nourisher next. She's in green and white here. And she cares about 1/1s. She is a commander all about little 1/1s, base toughness, power and toughness 1/1s, and then Bess gets herself bigger. And then whenever she attacks, every other creature with base power and toughness 1/1 gets bigger, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Bess. So this is definitely not just like a 1/1 counter deck, but also like I play a small army of maybe token creators or dudes, and then just boom, Bess gets bigger, your army gets bigger as you swing. It's pretty cool. We've got Denry Klin, Editor-in-Chief, 2 white-blue for a 2/2. He enters the battlefield with your choice of a 1/1, first strike, or vigilance counter on it. Whenever a non-token creature you control enters, which apparently includes Denry based on some rulings I've seen, Denry has counters on it, put the same number of and kind of counters on that creature. So what's interesting about the wording here is that he enters with that counter on it. Like, he comes in before anything triggers, he gets either a 1/1 counter, a first strike counter, or a vigilance counter on him. Then he says, whenever a non-token creature you control enters, Denry will see himself enter, notice that he has a counter on himself, and put another one. It's a little weird, and I don't think that's how Wizards intended it, but as far as I can tell, that's how this card works in the rules. And you're just definitely playing this as like a sneak a bunch of counters onto your Azorius Legend deck, and then every other non-token creature you make is getting a bunch of extra benefits. First strike is really big, vigilance is huge as well, and those 1/1 counters certainly do not hurt. So if you can find ways to sneak additional counters onto Denry, your team is going to thank you for it. We have Falco Spara Pact Weaver. This is our first 3-color legend that we're looking at, and in fact one of the leaders of the Capenna families, the mob families. This guy is a dude, he enters with a shield counter on him, and then he basically just lets you cast things off at the top of your library as long as you remove a counter from something you control while you do it. So it doesn't have to be 1/1 counters, but you definitely want to just be spreading out counters onto your team, and then just windmill slamming extra cards off the top of your deck. A lot of card advantage here. Pretty darn cool as well, and the fact that he gets a shield counter on him certainly makes him a little safer as well. And then also in the Bant colors, we have Cross Defense Contractor. He lets you put a shield counter on target creature an opponent controls at the beginning of your upkeep, and when you put one or more counters on a creature you don't control, tap it, goad it, and it gains trample until your next turn. So this is a very different style of deck from Falco. Instead of trying to put counters on your own stuff, you're trying to, in Bant colors as well, stick counters onto your opponent's stuff, and then just make your opponents beat each other to death. Really cool. And certainly a way to defend. I will absolutely give Cross that. Super interesting deck, and I think you should check this one out too. Next we have Henzi Toolbox Torre. This is the first one we're going to look at in the Jund colors. He gives the creature spells you cast with mana value 4 or less Blitz. And the Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. So basically, if you cast a spell, you can choose to Blitz it instead. When that happens, that creature gains haste. And when it dies, draw a card, and then you have to sack it at the beginning of the next end step. And then Henzi is going to make your your Blitz costs 1 cheaper for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. Very powerful little effect. Basically, you should be playing big, beefy, dangerous dudes that you don't mind going to the graveyard because they've got a big enter or a big swing effect. You're going to be drawing additional cards off of it and just setting your board up for massive swings very quickly with Henzi. We have the Beamtown Bullies next, also in Jund. They're 4/4 with Vigilance and Haste. You can tap it to give target opponent a non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control. You give it haste, you goad it, which means they have to swing with it, and not at you, unless they can't attack anybody else, and then they have to exile at the end step. So you pack your graveyard full of powerful ETB effects, but when I say powerful ETB effects, I mean like bad ETB effects, the things your opponents don't want to have. And then you just give those cards to them and really screw them over. Beamtown is a super weird deck, but it seems pretty popular, and it looks absolutely crazy to play against. And then our last John Zayatora, the Incinerator. This is almost a fork on Corvold in a sense, where you're sacking a dude, but instead of drawing a card, you're pinging an opponent, any target, not just an opponent, for damage equal to that thing's power, and then you make yourself 3 treasures. So in a sense, Zayatora is refunding part of its own mana cost. This card is interesting. I don't know if I would call it particularly insane, but I think if you have a lot of sacrifice outlets, or at least a lot of sacrifice fodder, Zayatora can certainly ramp you ahead really quickly as long as you can get that 6-mana dragon out quick. We have Jetmir next. This is Naya Commander. And basically, if you have 3 or more creatures, your dudes get +1/+0 and have Vigilance. 6 or more, they also get Trample and another +1/+0. And then 9 or more, they also have Double Strike and get a third +1/+0. This is go wide heaven right here. You're just trying to make as many dudes as you can so that Jetmir sticks, and then your creatures are +3/+0, Vigilance, Trample, Double Strike monstrosities. Jetmir is super dangerous. Crazy card. Even seeing some play in the competitive side of the format here. Really interesting card. We have Kit Kanto, Mayhem Diva next. She comes in and makes you a citizen, and then you can tap 2 untapped creatures that you control on the beginning of combat on each player's turn, and you get to go to something they control, give it trample, and give it +2/+2. So Kit Kanto is basically over here just going, hey you, asshole, go, get angry, beat up, and all you gotta do is just tap 2 of your tokens. Kit's pretty funny. She's supposed to be like a magical singer, so maybe she's like seducing them with the power of her voice. But I love this card. I think it's super funny. And as long as you have the tokens to kind of back it up, Kit Kanto does a lot of work. And then my personal favorite commander from this entire set, Ginny Faye, Jetmir's second. She basically says whenever you make a token, you can instead make that many 2/2 green cats with haste or 3/1 dogs with vigilance. Super easy to cast. With those hybrid mana values of red-green and the green-white. So base green of a deck, and you're just trying to throw as many token makers into the deck as you can. Make sure those tokens are like little dudes and easily repeatable, and then you're getting 2/2s or 3/1s instead. You can just take over a game that way. I adore my Ginny Faye deck. It's one of my absolute favorite to play. This card is so wonderful. We have Rocco, Cabaretti Caterer next. This is effectively a tutor. He enters. If you cast it, you get to search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle. View Rocco as any creature that you want out of your deck being your commander, but just happens to cost 3 more. This card is a combo machine. Absolutely seeing play in the competitive side of EDH. Rocco is incredibly dangerous and is effectively like counter on site. You can't even just kill on sight him because he's already done his job. Rocco's insane. And it's an uncommon. Crazy card. Next, we're going to get into our Grixis or Maestro side of things here. We got Lord Xander, the Collector. This card was like the boogeyman for this set as it was first coming out. And it hasn't made as big of an impact as I think people thought it was going to. Turns out 7-mana commanders are kind of hard to cast. But he has an ETB effect that makes a target opponent discard half the cards in their hand rounded down when he enters. When he attacks, the player he's attacking mills half their library. When he dies, target opponent sacks half the non-land permanents they control rounded down. He's still very powerful. He's still very hateful. He's still incredibly dangerous. But he's just not as insanely broken as everybody thought he was going to be. And the fact that it's target opponent rather than each opponent certainly brings him down a little bit for commander. Still a cool card, though, and I don't know if I'd run him as the commander, but I could certainly see him making a home in the 99. We have Angelo the Painter. He has Death Touch, and then he just gives your instant or sorcery spells Casualty 2, which basically says you sack a creature with power 2 or greater when you cast the spell. You get a free copy of that spell. Super cool card. Casualty is an amazing mechanic out of this set, and just given all of your instants or sorceries, or at least the first one you cast each turn, that effect, as long as you're making sure you're getting enough tokens going, and you're in blue, there's lots of instant and sorcery token makers, you're going to have a phenomenal time. And Hello is incredible. And then we have Parnice, the Subtle Brush. She is fascinating. So when you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you counter it unless they pay 4. So it's like giving everything and yourself ward 4 life. And then when you copy a spell, up to one target opponent may also copy the spell and choose new targets for the copy. Very risky effect, really quite dangerous, but if you can make friends with people, and or maybe there's somebody who's more of an archenemy at the table, you can effectively turn all of your removal spells into a double up by just saying, hey buddy, I know like we're not quite in the lead right now, so let me cast this, why don't you copy it and we can take out something else. There's certainly some efficiency here, and Parnice does a nice job of protecting your own board as well by really taxing your opponents. We have Cormella, Glamour Thief next. She's a hasty girl, vampire rogue. You can pay 1 and tap her to add Grixis. You can only use it to cast your instants and sorceries, but when she dies, you get one of your instants or sorceries out of your graveyard to your hand. Cormella's really cool. Semi-mana ramp here. Like she's more than you're getting out of her, but as long as you're doing it every turn, you're getting quite efficient colors out of Cormella, and the dies trigger is really valuable as well, in my opinion. Then we have Evelyn the Covetous. This card can be very easily, in fact, an instant win, like an infinite combo here. As long as you are able to flicker or bounce and recast Evelyn forever, yeah, you win, because you just empty all of your opponent's decks. Sure, that's not like the way that you should play this deck. It's definitely like was trying to be a Grixis vampire tribal effect that lets you cast a bunch of stuff of your opponents, as long as you got it with Evelyn or the vampires. But she just turned into a combo machine. So Evelyn has some interesting play patterns here. I think the vampire tribal is probably more fun. But the Endless Flicker is so dangerous, and Evelyn is very powerful. Plus she has Flash. Why not? And then we have Rafine, Scheming Seer. This is an Esper commander. She's a Sphinx demon. Flying in Ward 1, and when you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So you can draw that many cards, discard that many cards, and you put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each non-land you discarded that way. Rafine is like the ultimate reanimator commander, right? Like, you make a bunch of little tokens, or maybe just like a couple big dudes, and then you swing in. One of those creatures is now going to get bigger, and you just get to pick and choose what you shove right into the graveyard. Really powerful, amazing card filtering. Rafine is really strong. We have Tivit, Seller of Secrets. This card is like a premier competitive commander staple right now. For a 6-mana card like this, it doesn't look like it should be busted. But has flying in Ward 3, so it's got some decent protection. And then when he enters or deals combat damage to a player, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, you investigate, so you make a clue token. For each bribery, you make a treasure token. When voting, you get an extra vote. Wizard's intent with this card was absolutely to make a Will of the Council, Council's Dilemma, like voting type of commander. Instead, they created an infinite, a near infinite, not quite infinite, killer with Time Sieve, which requires you to sacrifice 5 artifacts in order to take an extra turn. Well, as long as you have 3 opponents, Tivit is making, 5 artifacts every time he connects, and he's a big flyer. So as long as your opponent doesn't have blockers ready, I mean, they're dead. You've taken infinite turns, or at least has gotten as close as you possibly can. If you need to, I mean, you can make that the mana there, because you get 2 votes. You can get card draw with the Investigates if you're not going infinite that way. Tivit absolutely needed to have been like slightly reworded or something, because the Time Sieve combo is just insane. But it's really cool that we got some sort of voting commander here. It's just a shame that it turned out like this. I love the card, don't get me wrong. I love the competitive deck for this too. But like, whew, give me a cool voting commander that isn't just an infinite combo, please. Thank you. And then we have Quasar, Augur of Agonies. When you draw a card, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Draw a lot of cards, win a game. This is a draw deck. This is an Esper Draw Go control deck. We honestly don't have as many of those as I think people think we do in Commander. Quasar certainly makes an argument for why there needs to be some like this. She's really good, really dangerous. I like her a lot. All right, we're out of the commanders. Let's blitz through the non-commander cards here. So these are cards that go in the 99 that I think have absolutely made an impact on the commander game. Either I'm playing these in some decks, or I know people who do, or I just think these are cool cards that offer something to the game, and it's all thanks to Capenna. All right, Contractual Safeguard. This is an instant that lets you put a shield counter on a creature you control if you cast it during your main phase, but otherwise, you just choose a counter on a creature you control, and then put a counter of that kind on each other creature you control. So, like it says, if you main phase this, you get to basically shield counter your whole team. And if you don't, but you've got a good counter somewhere, maybe like, I don't know, an indestructible counter from one of the Myojin or something, this card is an insane instant speed blowout. Very impressed with this card. Damning Verdict blows up all creatures with no counters on them. For only 5 mana, getting a selective Wrath like this is really strong. Grand Crescendo is one of the best protection pieces we've gotten in years. For 2 mana, your creatures just gain indestructible until end of turn. But you can pay X into this and make a 1/1 green and white citizen for each mana you pump into this. So not only is this card protecting your team, but you can generate an army on the spot from it as well. And those creatures are getting indestructible, so you can do this in response to being absolutely swung at by somebody with a bunch of huge stuff. Halo Fountain is a win con for a go-wide deck, kind of like what Grand Crescendo allows. By paying 5 white mana, tapping it, and untapping 15 tap creatures you control, you just win. Also, you can do that for 2 creatures and draw a card, or 1 creature to make a creature. Halo Fountain is really, really powerful in go-wide decks that can get their creatures tapped. Card's real scary. If you see this on the board, be ready to get rid of it. We have Inspiring Overseer. This is a common, but this card has seen play in several of my commander decks. 2 and a white for a flyer. When it enters, you gain a life and draw a card, and it's a 2/1 flyer, just for 3 mana. Card's amazing. Absolute killer role player in decks that care about flying, in decks that care about angels, even in decks that care about clerics, and more importantly, in blink decks, which is one of the places I'm playing my copies. Mage's Attendant is another amazing blink target, but also just great in white decks in general that kind of want some interaction counter abilities. I just think it's way better in flicker decks. When it enters, you make a 1/1 blue wizard with 1, sack this creature, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. I play this in my blink deck because you can blink the Mage Attendant, a whole bunch, and then just have onboard, mana leak type effects on just waiting for your opponent to try and cast something dangerous. It really slows the pace of a game down, and in my opinion, that's usually not a bad thing. You absolutely want to be telling your opponents, like, you either win this right now, have a way to get out of it, or hold a whole bunch of mana up as attacks. Master of Ceremonies next is kind of like a voting card, but is not specifically worded as voting, which is really strange. I wish this played a little nicer with Tivit. But basically it says each player chooses to either make each of us a treasure, each of us a 1/1, or each of us draw a card. Yeah, don't hate it. Interesting card. Been trying it out in a couple of decks. And just overall, it's kind of nice group huggy effect. Really just gives everybody exactly what they need, and then you just get that as well. Rabble Rousing is another insane go-wide card here. It's 5 mana, but you get to hide away 5, so peek at your top 5, pick something out of it, and exile it. The rest go on the bottom. Later, Rabble Rousing can trigger and let you cast that spell for free. So when you attack with 1 or more creatures, you make that many 1/1 green and white citizens. And if you control 10 or more creatures, you get to play your card for free. I play this in Ginny Fae because instead of making 1/1s, I'm either making 3/1 Vigilancers or 2/2 Hasters. Phenomenal. Like, this card is insane. It's doubling your board presence every time you swing with your team. Crazy, crazy powerful. It is worth the 5 mana investment. Resourceful Defense is just another Ozolith, but with a nice effect here, with the 4 and a white. So when a permanent you control leaves, if it has counters on it, put those counters on another permanent. 5 mana, you can move any number of counters from a permanent to another permanent. Crazy. You always want more Ozolith effects. Ozolith is an insane card. And so getting this as a white enchantment is Really, really strong, shifting things around, passing out counters as stuff dies. Amazing card. Rumor Gatherer is our first card with Alliance, which cares about creatures entering the battlefield. Your first creature that enters lets you scry one each turn. The second time draws you a card. Play creatures. Get cards. Rumor Gatherer is awesome. Skyboon Evangelist is a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. Oh my god, I never noticed how funny his wig looks. That's hysterical. I love his little barrister wig. That's so good. So good. Anyway, when he enters, support 6. So you put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 6 other creatures. Whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, that creature gains flying. Basically, this card says, don't attack me and your dudes are evasive. Love Skyboon Evangelist, and it makes your team really hard to interact with as well. Sky Crier is a group hug card. It has flying and lifelink, as a 1/1, but for 4 mana, you and one other opponent can each draw a card. Pretty cool. We have Smuggler's Share next. This is a card that I definitely thought was going to play a little better than it does, but that doesn't mean it's a bad card. It's just not as good as I wanted it to be. But anyway, either way, at the beginning of each end step, you draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then you make a treasure for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter this turn. That second ability does not trigger as much as I hoped it would. And unfortunately, that first one doesn't trigger as much as I had hoped it would either. Most people who can draw a lot of cards in a turn might just space them out just to mess with you. But either way, I still think this is a powerful piece. I just don't think it was quite up to the hype that everyone was giving it when this card was first spoiled a year ago. We have Aerial Extortionist next. When it enters or deals combat damage to a player, you exile a target non-land permanent they control. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Even better, just exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. Anything on the board that's a problem. Hey, buddy, that's a very dangerous card over there. What? Let me hit you for 4? I know it's a lot, but let me hit you for 4. I'll get rid of it. Now, the owner can cast it as long as it remains exiled, but Aerial Extortionist says whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere except their hand, you just get to draw a card. Yeah, absolutely. Play your commander, I draw a card. Cast the thing that I stole, draw a card. Aerial Extortionist is really powerful. Angelic Sleuth is a 3-mana 2/3 flyer. When another permanent you control leaves the battlefield, so even if you flicker it, it has a counter on it, you get to investigate, so you make yourself a little clue. Pretty powerful effect. We're in blue now. We have Aven Courier. This is a 1/1 flyer for 2. When it attacks, you choose a counter on a permanent you control. You can put a counter of that kind on a different permanent you control if it doesn't have a counter of that kind on it. So this is kind of just a sneaky little way to spread some counters around, but there are some really powerful counters, like shield counters, like indestructible counters, flying counters, that Aven Courier does a really good job of spreading around. Change of Plans, X 1 and a blue. You can have each of up to X target creatures you control connive, and then you can have any of them phase out. So you're going to basically pick a bunch of cards on your board if you have the mana for it. You get to draw a card for each of them, discard a card for each of them, and then put a 1/1 counter on that creature if you discarded a non-land. And then you can protect the team as well, like phase them out if they are a problem. Change of Plans is pretty flexible, pretty interesting. Not crazy, but definitely not bad. Even the Score is X blue, blue, blue to draw X cards at instant speed, but the spell costs no blue to cast if an opponent has drawn 4 or more cards this turn. Now, don't get me wrong. That is a pretty high ask. 4 or more cards drawn in a turn can be pretty significant. This is an instant, so if you're holding up mana, you don't really have like a lot of interaction, or you're just holding up mana anyway, even the Score can suddenly become a massive burst of cards for you. In Too Deep is one of the new transform removal spells. 2 blue for an enchantment aura with Split Second. And then you can enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. The permanent becomes a clue and loses all other abilities. Yeah, great removal spell. Forces your opponent to pay 2 mana to even get it back. Cashes it just right out of the game. I really like In Too Deep, and I think if you're looking for weird removal, this is a great one, especially since it has Split Second, so your opponent just doesn't get to respond to their thing becoming a clue until it is already a clue. Ledger Shredder is an obvious card here. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. Amazing Magic the Gathering card, both in normal non-commander magic. In competitive commander, it's great. And in normal commander, it's still also really awesome. This is a great way to filter some cards out of your hand. Triggers off of anybody playing their second spell each turn. And you're getting some cards and growing your flyer. Mask of the Schemer next is really interesting too. It costs 5 mana to get going initially here, but when the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it connives X, where X is the amount of damage it dealt. So if you hit for 4, you're drawing 4, pitching 4, growing your creature a little bit. Really, really great filter effect. I've really been enjoying Mask of the Schemer in a couple of my blue decks, especially ones that have evasive creatures or powerful creatures that would like to grow, but I also just want to find better cards as I dig through my deck. Public Enemy is an enchantment that says all creatures attack enchanted creature's controller each combat if able. When the enchanted creature dies, you refund yourself. You get a card. I really like Public Enemy sticking on something the opponent controls that has Indestructible. This includes your creature, though, so do be ready for that. But, like, if you are, you're now super safe. Everything on the board has to be swinging at that player. Yeah, this card's hilarious. I really like Public Enemy, and it's really hard to handle. Slip Out the Back is next. For a single blue mana, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature, and it phases out. You can use this offensively to try and move an opponent's blocker out of the way for a turn, or this is one of the few ways to put 1/1 counters onto creatures you control in mono blue decks. It's really nice for that, too. I really like Slip Out the Back. Storm of Forms is really fun to say, and is a really good card. 4 mana for an instant, you get to cast the spell. When you cast the spell, you get to copy it for each kind of counter among the permanents you control. You can choose new targets for the copy, and you bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Now, there are a lot of decks out there that can get a bunch of really weird counters on things, and I think if you've built a deck around that type of effect, Storm of Forms is insane. 4 mana, and you got 9 copies pointed at 9 different dangerous things. Really awesome. Love Storm of Forms. Then we have Witness Protection. Similar to Into Deep, this is an enchantment transformation removal effect. Also, the art is so dang cool. But this card's also really funny. So, the creature you enchant loses all abilities, becomes a green and white citizen with base power and toughness 1/1, and it has a new name. It's now a legitimate business person. This card is so funny. I love Witness Protection. And it's also pretty good. Like, sure, the 1/1 is not indestructible, so it can go away pretty easily. But you just made a legitimate business person out of an Olamog, and that's hilarious. And then, one of the best counter spells that Wizards has printed in a couple years, really since, I guess, MH1. An Offer you can't refuse. A single blue mana for an instant that counters a non-creature spell, but its controller makes 2 treasure tokens. That seems like a fair deal. Your 7-drop, your giant draw spell countered, but you can have 2 treasures. So that's fine. I don't really care. This card is absolutely phenomenal to like start off a counter war with as well, because it won't resolve until the end, and then that extra mana just doesn't matter. Offer is phenomenal. It's the real deal. It started replacing Swan Song in a number of my decks. Great card. All right, we're into black. We got Body Count. It's an instant that draws a card for each creature that died under your control this turn, but you can cast it for only a single black mana instead of 2 in a black if an opponent has lost life this turn. Yeah, that's a great card. Really strong. Great card. Cemetery Tampering is 2 in a black with Hideaway 5 for an enchantment. Just like before Hideaway 5, you look at your top 5. Yeah. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can mill 3. If there's 20 or more cards in your graveyard, you get to play the exiled card for free. If you're playing a deck that is strong enough as a mill deck, something that cares about just getting stuff into your graveyard, having an enchantment that's just dumping 3 cards every single turn can really be a big boon. And Cemetery Tampering certainly is not a bad card, and you get a free spell off of it as well. Cut of the Prophets, X black sorcery, casualty 3. So if you sack a creature with power 3 or greater when you cast it, you get a copy of it. You draw X, you lose X. Simple, powerful, truly incredible art from Donato Giancola as well. My puppy, not my puppy, my mom's puppy has come over to say hello. That's why I'm not home today. Hello, big girl. Do you want to show up on camera? You want to say hi to everybody? Here, why don't you come over here? Let's tip this down. There she is. Say hi, Brinny. Very good. You coming over too, Isla? She's got 2 very pretty Goldens. Come here, sweet girl. Let's interrupt this episode with some dogs. There we go. Can you see her too? Nope, she's not close enough. Come here, Isla. There we go. Hi, baby girls. Yes, very good to see you both. All right, I'm going to go back to talking about magic cards instead of petting the puppies. All right, go lay back down. Good to see you. All right. Hi, it's me again. I'm less cute than those dogs, but let's get back to the cool cards instead of the cute dogs. But they're going to be here huffing now, so if you hear noises, it's... That was gross. Isla, what was that? That was gross. That was gross. All right, Lethal Scheme, incredibly powerful instant. 2 black with Convoke. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Scheme connives. Can you imagine? This is a effectively free removal spell that draws you 4 cards and then discards you 4 cards and maybe even grows your team. Every time I have cast this card has amazed me. I cannot believe this card is not more popular. Lethal Scheme is the real deal. Angel of Suffering is an amazing protection piece for decks that like to mill. It's 5 mana, 5/3 Nightmare Angel. Damage would be dealt to you. Prevent it and mill twice that damage instead. As long as you have a safe way to make sure that you're not just going to deck yourself right off the bat, you never have to block again as long as you can keep Angel of Suffering alive. Card's crazy. I really like it. Into red now, we have Arcane Bombardment. 6 mana for an enchantment, but when you cast your first instant or sorcery each turn, you get to exile another one out of your graveyard at random, and then you just copy all the cards that are exiled with Arcane Bombardment and cast them for free. So, I mean, just like the art shows, you start going off with this card, and you're going to have a massive stack of cards that every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you just get to lay a whole heap of cards onto the stack. Big Score is a really, really great draw spell with some really funny art. Look at that smile. She's so happy. 4 mana instant. Discard a card when you cast it as an additional cost. And then you draw 2 and make 2 treasure tokens. Nice kind of refund effect. Really powerful draw spell. Easy effect in red and really good to copy this card. If you can copy this card, boy, you're feeling phenomenal. Love Big Score. We have Determined Iteration next. It's a 2 mana enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you populate. The token created this way gains haste, but then you have to sack it at the start of your next end step. I'm okay with that. If I've got a really nice token on the board, I will happily take an extra copy of it with haste, and I just have to get rid of it at the end of the turn, and then I get it again the next turn. Ugh. Real nice. Love this card so very much. Devilish Valet is one of the funniest alliance creatures in this set. It's a trample haste 1/3 for 3. But when another creature enters, you double Devilish Valet's power until end of turn. So if you have a way to make a ton of creatures, Devilish Valet's power is about to be ridiculous. Also, it has really funny flavor text, so I just have a lot of love for this card. It's very jank, it's very entertaining, but boy is it fun. We have Glittering Stockpile. This is a really nice 3 mana rock. It's an artifact treasure for 3 mana. You tap it to add a red and then put a stash counter on it whenever you do. And then later, you can tap and sacrifice the stockpile to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of stash counters you have on Glittering Stockpile. So this is one of those rocks you put down, you build up, and then later in the game when you have like a big X spell or maybe a bunch of things you want to do in one turn, you just sack this for like 6-7 mana and then just go crazy. Also works really nicely with Proliferate if you're in a deck with red that can proliferate. Goldhound is next. Similar vibe. This is also a treasure, but this is an artifact treasure dog creature. It's first strike menace 1/1. You can tap and sack it to add a mana of any color. So this comes down early, can be a little defensive, a little aggressive if you need it to be, and then later on you just cash it in for a mana. Really cool card. Horde Hauler. Speaking of treasures, we're still going here because this one makes treasures. It's a 5/5 vehicle with trample, crew 3, and when it deals damage to a player, you make a treasure token for each artifact they control. So it's like a dockside train, kind of. Doesn't care about enchantments either. But I really like this card. I think it's super weird, but I think it's pretty powerful if you play your cards right. We have a split card next, a card with Aftermath. So I'll read it like this when we get there. The first half of the card is 2 and a red for a sorcery. When a creature you control attacks this turn, you make a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token that's tapped and attacking. So for each creature you swing with, you get another one. They're smaller, but they're another one. I play this in Ginny Fey, though, so they're either cats or dogs instead, which frankly, is also pretty significant. And then, Excess, 1 in a red, is a sorcery with Aftermath, so you can only cast it from your graveyard, but then you exile it. Create a treasure token for each creature you controlled that dealt combat damage to a player this turn. So if you have 5 mana up, you can do this all in one turn, or you can wait until later till you swing with a bunch of stuff, and then just get a stupid amount of treasures. Great card, especially if you're in a go-wide tokens deck. We have Industrial Advancement next. This is an enchantment for 3 in a red. Beginning of your end step, you can sack a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the creature's mana value. You put a creature from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest go onto the bottom. This is basically turning something little, or something medium-sized into something big. You can manipulate your top deck. It's even better. Really cool card. We have Life of the Party next. This is a 4-mana 0/1 with First Strike, Trample, and Haste. When it attacks, gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. But the really fun part about this card is that when it enters, if it's not a token, each opponent creates a token that's a copy of it, and the tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. What? So it's a first striker, so it's really hard to get rid of, especially because it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as long as you have more creatures. But the fact that this dude is Trample and Haste, and then you just give each opponent ones that they have to beat each other with, hilarious! I love Life of the Party. Such a fun elemental. Professional Facebreaker is next. Put 'em up, menace! 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, make a treasure token. You can sack a treasure, impulse draw from the top of your deck. It's a 2/3 as well. Professional Face... Did a little too much punching. No, Professional Facebreaker is awesome. Really powerful effect as well. You can spread out the love across all 3 opponents in order to get 3 treasure tokens rather than just 1. And if they're a double striker, you're getting 2 that way instead. It's real nice, real powerful. We have the Rose Room Treasurer, 3 in a red for a 4/3 Ogre Warrior with Alliance. Whenever another creature enters, make a treasure if it's the first or second time, and then for the 3rd time, you can pay X, and if you do, Rose Room Treasurer deals X damage to any target. This is another one of those cards that I play in Ginny Fae, because instead of making the treasure token, you just make a cat or a dog, and then it triggers again, and you get to make another cat or a dog, and then you can pay X if you really need to. But most of the time, this is just a free 2-creature generator for me as long as I get a creature out. And even when it's not, I mean, putting a creature on the board and getting a free treasure out of it twice, certainly not bad. Sticky Fingers is a crazy little aura for a single red mana. The enchanted creature has Menace, makes a treasure token whenever it deals combat damage to a player, and when it dies, you draw a card. Sticky Fingers is shockingly powerful for a common 1-mana aura. I really like it. It's kind of like a sneaky little piece of evasion that also kind of ramps you, kind of draws for you. Good card. Structural Assault is a kind of board wipey effect. 3 red for a sorcery. You destroy all artifacts, then it deals damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that were put into graveyards from the battlefield this turn. What's really fun about Structural Assault here is that if you're going to have treasures as their artifacts, unlike when somebody casts a Dockside Extortionist, you can't just sack the treasures to get around the damage. They're getting destroyed, or if you sacrifice them, you're still getting that damage to each creature. It's certainly an interesting board wipe in red. I really like it. I think you should give it a try, especially if your meta has a lot of artifacts or a lot of Docksides running around. We have Turf War next. This isn't a card that I think is powerful, but this is a card I think is funny as all hell. 5 mana enchantment. When it enters, for each player, you put a contested counter on target land that player controls. And you choose which lands get those counters. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, if that player controls 1 or more lands with the counters on them, you get to gain control of, or not you, but the creature's controller gets to gain control of one of those lands of their choice and untap it. And if for some reason you're able to flicker this or make copies of it, suddenly lands are just flying around the battlefield. Every time somebody pokes somebody for 1, if you hit 3 opponents and each of them have a contested counter, you're stealing all 3 of those lands. This card is hysterical. It's so funny. It's so wild. It causes utter chaos in games, and I think this card is a blast. I think you should try Turf War in a deck. Whether you care about lands or not, just the idea of battling over everyone's lands is so amusing to me. We have Widespread Thieving. This card's weird. I think this card is good, but not all of the card. So for 2 in a red, It's a Hideaway 5 enchantment. When you cast a multicolored spell, make a treasure. Then you can pay Wooburg, and if you do, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. I think this card is good because of the if you cast a multicolored spell, make a treasure. The pay Wooburg to cast something for free is certainly not casting something for free. And, like, it doesn't hurt the card, but I think the real highlight of this card is getting a treasure whenever you cast something that's 2 or more colors. Woody Roastmaster is an incredible damage piece. It's like a mini Perforos. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Woody Roastmaster is dealing a damage to each opponent. Great card. We're in green now. We have another boogeyman from the set, Bootlegger's Stash. Your lands have tap, create a treasure token on a 6-mana artifact. This card is not as good as everybody says it was going to be. This card is still awesome. It's just not like the end of the format. But whew, this is still pretty powerful. And this is another card I run in Ginny Fey, because every land turning into a 2/2 or a 3/1 is not insignificant. We have Fight Rigging next. This is another one of those hideaways enchantments. Beginning of combat on your turn, you can put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control. If you have something with 7 power or greater, you get your card for free. I just like this as kind of some incidental, here's an extra counter here, here's an extra counter here, and then just having a big dude and getting a free card off of it certainly doesn't hurt. Killer Service is next. It's a 3-mana enchantment. When it enters, you make a food for each opponent you have. Beginning of your end step, you can pay 2, sack a token, get a big 4/4. Big 4/4 Rhino Warrior. So if you're a token deck that makes a lot of like decent tokens or even junk tokens, honestly, because like I'm playing this in my Gimbal deck, which is one of the new commanders out of March of the Machine, and very powerful there because you're making a lot of junk tokens, and each of your end steps you can just pay 2 and turn one of those junk tokens into a 4/4 beater. Next of kin is an Aura out of the commander deck. You enchant a creature. When it dies, you can put a creature card you own with lesser mana value from your hand or from your command zone onto the battlefield, and the next of kin attaches to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. It's so unique. It's so weird. It's so interesting. I love next of kin. It dodges commander attacks because it just puts it out. Don't cast it. You just put it out. And sure, it rungs down rather than runging up, and so eventually you'll lose your next of kin. But as long as you've put it on something big enough early, it's going to be really significant late, and it's still going to be pretty good even if you put it on like a 4-drop. Park Heights Maverick is next. This is a 2/2 for 3 with Dethrone. So when it attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, you put a 1/1 counter on it. It can't be blocked by little dudes, so power 2 or less. When it deals combat damage to a player or dies, proliferate. And he's already putting 1/1 counters on himself, so just by himself, he's pretty synergistic. It just gets so much better with more stuff with counters. I play this in my Brokos Infect deck, and let me tell you, this card is a terror. The one downside in that deck is it is a human, so I can't stick Brokos on this, but that's fine. It's just so good. We have Scepter of Celebration. It's a 3-mana equipment with equip 3. Creature gets +2/+0 and trample, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you make that many citizens. This is a go-wide monstrosity as well. As long as you get something big, you get an army. You get blockers for the next turn. Really cool card. And the trample effect just makes sure that you're getting some damage in. Topiary Stomper is a ramp piece. It's 1 green for a 4/4 with Vigilance that can't attack or block unless you control 7 or more lands. When it enters, you get a basic land onto the battlefield tapped for free. I like this card. It's not broken or anything, but it sure is good. It's a solid little role filler in lands deck. Get you that land quickly, and then later on it'll become a 4/4 with Vigilance, but most of the time it's just some really pretty topiary. Super cool. And it's a plant dinosaur, which is real fun. We have Venom Connoisseur next. 2/2 for 2, Human Druid. Another creature enters, it gets Death Touch. Venom Connoisseur specifically gets Death Touch. But if it's the second time, every creature you control has Death Touch until end of turn. So this card can be really dangerous really quickly. And if you have ways to instant speed drop some creatures onto the board, this can turn any blockers that your opponents have done into a nightmare. Vivian on the Hunt is, I think, the one Planeswalker we're talking about in this entire list, and she's 6 mana, but she is Birthing Pod on a commander. almost better, honestly. So her +2, sack a creature. Search your library for a creature with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacked creature's mana value. Put it on the battlefield and shuffle. You can +1 her to mill 5 and put any number of creature cards milled this way into your hand. You can -1 to create a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature. Vivian on the Hunt is a crazy, crazy piece because there is an infinite combo here with Felidar Guardian, Kiki Jiki, and one other card that I'm absolutely blanking on right now, but it's something that returns a creature when it enters. It's crazy. You just get infinite copies of Felidar Guardian, and you just win the game on the spot. All right, we're going to be taking a break here in this list, and I will be uploading part 2 later tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching.